Alright, let me just start by saying this is an electronic warfare guide based partially on my observations and partially on the Gamepedia Roguetech wiki guide page on electronic warfare. I'm pretty sure this is how it works, but there's a chance I might be a little bit off. So I'll start with the basic explanation, then we'll go more in depth. So in this example, we have a Raven with an electronic warfare system, defenseless Irby, an Atlas with no electronic warfare but a lot of weapons, and a Cougar with a Beagle active probe and a C3 unit. So, in this example, with the Irby being here inside the protective bubble of the Raven's EWS, the Irby benefits some from the EWS bubble that the Raven has. As soon as the Irby leaves the protective bubble of the EWS, it is now completely and utterly defenseless and has no electronic protection at all. So as long as it's in the bubble, it's safe, and as long as it leaves the bubble, it is no longer safe. Well, safe being relative. Now, as soon as the Atlas gets inside of the EWS's jamming bubble, it's going to start taking sensor check penalties and thus accuracy penalties just from being within the bubble of the EWS, even if it's targeting the Irby. Then the Cougar with the Beagle active probe, the Beagle active probe is going to counter the ECM for the Cougar only. However, the C3 unit, when the Cougar with the C3 unit gets within range and the C3 unit becomes within range of the Raven, or again, if the Irby is in the protective bubble of the EWS and the Cougar with the C3 unit gets in range of the Irby, the C3 unit, unlike the Beagle active probe, is actually going to counter the ECM for the Atlas as well. So just by having the C3 unit equipped Cougar get in range of the target, the electronic warfare system of the Raven is going to be less effective even for the Atlas and for everyone else on the enemy team. Now, with just the Beagle active probe, the Cougar, just with having the Beagle active probe, is going to have negation for some of or all of the Raven's electronic warfare system, regardless of whether he's targeting the Raven or the Irby. And again, if the Irby is not in the bubble, then the C3 unit will still give, the C3 unit, where is it? The C3 unit will still give a bonus to sensors for everyone on the Cougar's team against the Irby. Even though the Irby has no electronic warfare, it will still increase the sensor check for everyone on the Cougar's team as soon as the Irby is within the C3 unit range. So the electronic warfare system, or any ECM, has the jamming, which it has personal jamming and it has AoE jamming, and the it also has the electronic warfare system also has Beagle built in, and it usually has a aura around it that if the Cougar is within the unjamming range of the Raven's EWS, its ECM will also be reduced by the EWS for everyone on the Raven's team. So I hope that explains things in the simplest terms. The Beagle active probe and C3 unit are to increase sensor checks and counter ECM. Beagle active probe primarily just for the unit it's on, and the C3 unit for everyone on that unit's team. The EWS defends against attacks and sensors, and can jam targets' accuracy or sensor checks within its range, as well as protecting and giving ECM to non-ECM equipped mechs within its range. So there's the absolute basics, and now let's go ahead and go to the actual numbers. So one thing to note is ECM jamming and shielding effectively reduces an attacker's accuracy by 0.7 per point, which that's difficulty, not percentage. That's not percent chance to hit, that's the difficulty. Similar to being in woods giving the enemies a +2 difficulty to hit you, and giving you a +1 difficulty to hit units outside of the woods. So 0.7 difficulty per point to a maximum of the +7 difficulty, which is the penalty for no sensors. C3 and probes offset the penalty by the same amount per point. So again, 0.7 difficulty per point of jamming, and minus 0.7 per point of unjamming. Stealth, it's worth noting, gives additional accuracy penalties separate from ECM, but is also countered by probes. So with stealth armor, if you're able to reduce an enemy's accuracy to the level of no sensors and give them the +7 difficulty for their attack, stealth will actually add on to that and make it even harder for them to hit. As well as reducing your signature and potentially hiding you completely from their sensors. So the way that all works is a single electronic warfare check is made at the start of each round per unit, and that check is anywhere between -14 to 14, and then is modified by mech warrior skills, electronic warfare components, stealth, etc. The result of the check determines if you can even target the unit, as well as how much information you get from the unit, which also gives you a gauge on how much your accuracy is being penalized for it. So if you have a 0 or less after the electronic warfare check is made and after all of your modifications from your mech warrior skills and electronic warfare components, anything less than 0, the target does not show on sensors, and the only way you can even target it is if you have visual target acquisition, which basically means if you're within range of being able to physically see the mech. But you're still firing with no sensors, which is giving you a +7 difficulty. So if you have a 0, it shows the location only, and that's when you just don't know whether it's even a mech or a vehicle. A 1 is it shows whether it's a mech or a vehicle, and a 2 shows the chassis. So for example, an Atlas, it'll just show the actual chassis. It won't show any details, it won't show what variant it is, etc. So then from 3 to 8, you get progressively more information. If you get a 9, it shows the exact armor and structure per location, as well as the heat and stability of the mech. A 10 shows the component locations, buffs, and debuffs, so that's when you can hover over the center torso and see, oh, it's got an XL engine. And an 11 or higher shows the pilot info as well. So how many wounds the pilot has and things like that. So ECM and stealth can not only reduce an enemy's hit chance against you, it can also completely prevent them from being able to target your unit without direct visual, which stealth also reduces your visibility, meaning that if you're stealthed in cover and the enemy's sensor rolls is reduced enough, they will be unable to detect you, period. You could be standing almost right in front of them and not be targetable. Note, however, that enough sensors and probes in a mech with a skilled mech warrior can completely offset the accuracy penalties from target ECM. Stealth, as far as I can tell, still gives some difficulty to hit, even if you do have perfect visual and perfect sensors on the target. But that I can't verify. It seems like stealth mechs are slightly harder to hit even if they're out in the open against somebody with a Beagle active probe and everything. All electronic warfare components can be divided by personal effects, area of effect, and squad or lance effect. So ECM and stealth well, the stealth is just affecting the mech that has the stealth. ECM has a self component and an area of effect component, and then C3 units and some electronic warfare suites are the only things that benefit the entire lance. It is possible, if you build it right, for a light or medium scout mech to run around inside the enemy's lines and negating their ECM and reducing their accuracy against your entire force. Likewise, if you have a stealth sniper mech, you could potentially stay untargetable outside of the range and just firing at them with no return fire. So with that being said, let's just look at some of the exact numbers. So in this list I've got the different ECMs, C3s, electronic warfare suites, everything that's in Roguetech. The active components here are the area of effect that the different ECM components have and electronic warfare systems have. Self and passive apply to all targets outside of the range. So the jamming here only applies if the enemy is within the area, so 180, 210, etc. The jamming here would apply to them. So again, in the example, the Atlas being within range of the Raven would have these penalties applied if the Raven had these ECMs. The unjamming is if the Cougar has a, say, Guardian ECM, and it's within and the Raven, the enemy Raven is within. Let me just go back to it. So if the Cougar has a Guardian ECM, so if the Cougar has an ECM and is within range of the Raven with the electronic warfare suite, their ECM would basically counteract each other to this degree. So the Guardian ECM would jam the Raven's sensors by 3 and unjam by 2. And if the Raven had, for example, a Watchdog clan EWS, then the unjam would, again, for its units, counter the active jamming of 2. However, the self-jamming would still apply, so altogether it would be a 1 for the Raven's defenses. Again, this is just me trying to figure it out best I can based off the wikis and based off of my own experience. So, getting your units with ECM in range of other units with ECM counters the ECM to a degree. And the Beagle active probes only affect the unit that carries them. So actually I do not have the probes on this list. I just have C3. Okay, well, I'll need to figure out and put the probes on here, but you'll see some things like the O and C3 Beagle active probe. The sight percent increases, and the probe and advanced sensors. The advanced sensors is what the sensor check bonus is, and the probe is how much it counters ECM. But it's very complicated and very, very much hard to figure out. It's not exactly well spelled out in Roguetech what exactly the electronic warfare is doing behind the scenes. But the basic concept, the basic idea is you have electronic warfare to reduce your enemy's sensor check with the goal of reducing their accuracy and potentially making your units untargetable. So that's why you bring ECM and stealth. And then you bring things like active probes and C3 units to counteract the enemy's stealth. So if the enemy has absolutely no stealth systems at all, then your tonnage that you spent on Beagle active probes or C3s or whatever are still useful for increasing your sensor check in case you get a bad sensor roll. And ECM is still useful even if the enemy has Beagle active probes and C3 units and such, because it reduces their sensor check. So if they get a bad roll, you still benefit from the ECM, even if they have all the electronic warfare components they need to counter it. So in short, bring a Raven. Make sure not all of your units are like the defenseless Irby. And if you do have units like the Atlas that just have a ton of weapons and armaments, make sure you bring scout mechs with them to help counter the electronic warfare of the enemy.